Hey everybody, back for another catch-up video here. We've got us both back again. We've got yet another perspective on the grand tour of the trailer. It is nighttime, so hopefully the light's all right. But I wanted to talk on this one about the choice of where we're at. So why St. David? Obviously, we lived in Chandler, Arizona, so we both love Arizona and wanted to stay in Arizona, so that was an easy decision. But where in Arizona was not as simple. When we started, it might go back almost a year or something now, when we first started seriously thinking about an off-grid life, we actually got started with something called Earthships. You may or may not have heard of them, but look them up. And there's still actually the possibility that we may do something like that. We haven't decided exactly what we're going to build and how we're going to build it yet. But
we actually started off kind of joking around with our friends
yeah,
about it.
Yeah, sure. But, you know, when we first started actually looking at land in Arizona, we knew we wanted to stay in Arizona. I assumed, and at the time I didn't know that this was an incorrect assumption, I assumed that we would have to go north. So we were in the Phoenix area. And obviously it's pretty warm and pretty dry, so I thought, you know, we'd have to go north to get a little more temperate. You know, it's always, most of Arizona is pretty hot. If you go up north in Arizona, it can actually be not too bad in places like Flagstaff and things, but I thought we'd have to go a little north, you know, from Phoenix to get a little bit of relief from the heat and maybe a little more water, you know, if you're going to try and catch water, which we are eventually. That was my assumption, and we started to look. And we actually got kind of, the idea kind of died for a little bit because, you know, land up north, even some of the remote areas, at least a little remote, you know, land was not cheap. So, you know, we were looking at places like, you know, Payson area. And we went out, you know, from those towns a little bit, Payson, Flagstaff, up kind of by, there's a ski area up in Show Low. And you know, not obviously right in town and things would obviously be expensive. That wouldn't be too surprising. But even kind of when we got out away from things, it was still pretty expensive just to get some land. So what really kind of revived our choice was when we found Derek and Hannah. Derek is Handyman.
Handeeman.
I think both on Instagram and YouTube. I'll put a link in the description.
Yeah.
But it was nice to see somebody who was actually doing it in Arizona. You know, they were doing all the things we wanted to do, and they were doing it in Arizona, and that proved that you could do it, right? And for us, it was a thought, but, you know, we didn't know if, you know, everything we watched online, you know, there were people in Canada, there were people in Europe, you know, doing all these things, and it was, the question for us was, well, can you really do it in Arizona? You know, it's really, really hot. Can you really get away with all that? Can you live on solar and run, you know, enough air conditioning and things like that to be able to do what you want to do? So we found Derek and Hannah doing it and documenting it very well. That's what really got us interested again, or got us going when we thought the idea might kind of die.
That it might
for a little while.
Doable and affordable.
Yeah. So we went and visited them, and they're in St. David as well. They're our neighbors now. And again, so St. David, if you either you know or you can check it out, is actually southeast of Phoenix.
It's close to Tombstone.
It is very close to Tombstone.
20 miles from Tombstone.
But if you don't know, and I knew this, but I never really thought about it, you can actually go south in Arizona from Phoenix. And even though you're going south, and my mind tells me that going south is going to get warmer, it actually goes up in elevation a good bit. So Tucson is actually, you know, 1,000 plus feet, I think, higher than Phoenix, maybe 1,500 feet. And they do get a little relief from the heat. And also, it's not as big a city, not as much pavement and all that stuff, so it tends to cool down at night more. And we're beyond Tucson from Phoenix, another 45 minutes-ish, and up more in elevation. We're about 3,700 feet, I think, here. So actually, we're up a little bit. So it's still warm, obviously. It's still Arizona. It's still pretty warm, but it's a good bit cooler than the Phoenix area and even the Tucson area, and it gets a little more water as well. Not a ton still, but but again, it was nice to see somebody who was doing it and kind of pulling off all the things we wanted to do. So that was one of the reasons we chose where we are, which is in St. David. It's in Cochise County in Arizona, which another kind of reason, and we learned this from Derek and a few others afterwards, is that when you build, Cochise County is actually pretty easy about what they let you build and things. You can actually file for what they call, I believe, opt-out permits, to where when they inspect, or you can opt out of inspections while you're building. And actually what they do is when you've built your structure, they really are just interested in things like setbacks from property lines and things like that. They actually don't go through all of the normal steps that you would for a building. So they're pretty lenient. So that's another big plus. There's a couple actually that Derek interviewed a while back that's in Bisbee that kind of said the same thing. So that makes Cochise County attractive in Arizona. So that's another one of the reasons we're here. Obviously just general size. We were in that kind of 4 or 5 plus acres ballpark. A standard plot I think is 4 acres. We've actually got kind of 2 plots we could split in half if we wanted to. We've got 8 acres. But it just, we looked around for a little while. We saw some that were possibilities. St. David actually has a decent amount of flooding. If you check kind of the flood maps, we were pretty serious about a piece of property that had a wash running right through the middle of it. We actually have a wash on the edge of our property. But one of the properties we were pretty serious about had a, you look on FEMA's flood maps and it's in a kind of a high risk area. Now that doesn't necessarily mean anything's going to happen. You might go your whole lifetime and nothing might ever happen, but it was a little scary. So we got, I think, a little up higher with this property than that property we were looking at. And it just was set up nicely for us. It's got a little slope to it, so we can do some things with gravity and water, hopefully. There's a little, in some future videos we'll show some of the layout of the land, but there's kind of a little mountain on the land. It's more of a hill than a mountain.
I like
It's not
to hike,
huge.
So I have a lot of hiking mountains.
Yeah, there's a lot of places to go hiking, a lot of places to ride bikes,
to explore.
So that's kind of how we chose this spot. It was, it was economical. Some of the rules are very friendly, and climate-wise in Arizona, it worked. So that's and our neighbor, who's already been very helpful and will continue to be very helpful, Derek and Hannah from Handyman.
Yes, we're really grateful.
Again, they've done most of the things that we're planning on doing, so it's just nice to have somebody who's done it and they're nearby. And one of our projects coming up that we'll document is building a solar system. It'll start off as a sort of a mini version of what we'll eventually have. It'll just be to feed the trailer for the time being, but that's one of the projects we're going to work on pretty soon, and we'll document that. And Derek's going to help with that a lot because he did his own solar setup at his place. So that covers kind of how we got to this specific location and why. If you got any questions about it, feel free to let us know. We're also going to talk about in another video how we got kind of our temporary setup, this lovely trailer that you see us in making these videos. That was actually a little bit of a stroke of luck of how we found kind of what we ended up in. So check back and comment, like, share, subscribe, and let us know if you have any questions or if there's anything else you want to see. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.